Hey, everybody, we're live. This is Loren Baker, founder of Search Engine Journal. And with me, I have two very longtime friends, colleagues as guests today. Brian, how about you go first? Nice little introduction.
Oh, yeah. So I've been doing this for a while, about 22 years. Every year it gets longer. It's amazing how that happens. But yeah, I started a little site in 2006 called Copy Blogger. Turned out that was called content marketing. Who knew, when I started in 98 that's what it was called. But yeah, and we built that into a pretty decent sized business of software and hosting and all sorts of stuff. Most of which I sold in 2018 and 2019. And now I had a couple side projects that I did for fun that I turned into businesses called Unemployable and Further. So that's a summary, I guess.
Nice. And how about on your side, Chris?
Well, I started blogging in 98 when they called it journaling, and I was a fan of Brian since from forever. I bought pretty much every project or product Brian made, or was given some of them so that I could sell them even more. So either way, I have been like following along behind, taking all the breadcrumbs, hiring his developers when I can, and to make my site look as close to his as I could. So I just follow Brian around. My site of record was chrisbrogan.com, which still exists. It's just, who goes there anymore? But I run a daily video show right now called The Backpack Show, which unlike Brian's is, it's not exactly a business yet. We have a few sponsors, but it's not like I can quit my day job on it. But it's a weekday show where I made a little pivot in which we don't talk to any of my marketing turd head friends. We talk to like all kinds of interesting, unique people that we're looking for business insights outside of the realm of people we normally all hang out with.
Right.
But that's been fun, and it'll be kind of hopefully germane for the conversation, just because every other part of my business is in the same world that we all still operate in. And why did I decide to go make a video show completely outside that realm and think that was going to be fun?
It's funny though, like I'm in the middle of SEO stuff all day, right? Whether it's SEJ stuff or client stuff and things like that. And if I go to like, I don't know, typically it's like one of my wife's friends' husbands or something. I start talking to him and the guy like has a dry cleaning business. Like, oh, that's interesting. And then like, it seems like to an extent, when you talk about something that's a little bit different than what you're dug into on a daily basis, you start just coming up with ideas again, the mind clear. You use different parts of your mind that you typically set aside for the rest of the day. So I find that enjoyable. Even listening to podcasts like your own, I find it just enjoyable to listen to a little bit something different. Speaking of which, when I saw your podcast was the Backpack Show, it got me thinking of that leather bag company that had reached out to us a long time ago about doing some content marketing. And I'm like, what else have you done? They're like, well, we sponsored Chris Brogan and gave him a backpack. Yeah.
Nice
Pretty
bag.
nice stuff.
It was a really good quality bag, that's for darn sure. And, this is the earlier days of influencer marketing when no one really knew what that was. And, I always love to I love I told you so's. And this one's not an I told you so, but if everyone had listened to Ted Murphy way back when, everyone would have been 15 years earlier with everything that they're doing right now, because he had it all figured out. And so, they didn't go that route, and they just came to idiots like me and like, if we give you a bag and a couple of bucks, would you like go make a video? Okay.
Of course.
And that did nothing. Like nobody saw me walking around with that bag and said, I need one of those.
Well, hold on a second now. I think Chris is selling himself a little short here. Do we forget New York Times bestselling author and dynamic?
That's true.
Remember when we used to have conferences? Chris used to go to those and they would pay him money to be funny. So yeah. Anyway, but yeah, the Backpack Show reminds me of Dora the Explorer. So
I never ever sing that song ever.
Nice. So what I wanted to get into a little bit today is audiences, right? So like, Brian, you sold Copy Blogger a couple of years ago, but you're still working on publishing projects. And to me, they seem like you said, it's a side project, but also kind of a labor of love, right? Like to an extent, Further seems like some of the, the personal conditioning that you've been doing moving forward as we're hitting our golden years, so to speak, right? And then with Unemployable, I found that to be really interesting from a solo entrepreneur. Oh, don't you also have solopreneur as well? Isn't that one of your side projects, or am I off there?
No,
Is there
that's
another
not
one? That's not you. Sorry. Okay. But being kind of the solo entrepreneur from time to time and things like that, I found that group to be pretty useful. And then Chris, like you just said that you're kind of going down a completely different route of what you do from an audience perspective. So like either one of you first, like have you found that having a smaller audience of more targeted people that are actually getting what you're saying and you can connect with leads to more than just, a business proof of concept, but more of a personal achievement and fulfillment at the end of the day?
Well, first of all, let me clarify that we sold everything but Copyblogger, and that's the way to do it.
Okay,
the platform that allowed us to grow to a bootstrapped 8-figure company, we sold everything that made money and kept the audience. But to your point, Further and Unemployable are much smaller audiences. I remember, I started Copyblogger and I went about 18 months before we launched our first product because I wanted to make sure that I had identified what the audience really wanted. And, at that time it had gotten to a decent size, but I did the exact same thing when I found the product for Unemployable with around 4,500 people. Now, these were highly engaged Brian Clark fans, if you will. And those are the people you're looking for. It's not the size of the audience. It's how many people, are there that are giving you feedback and signals about the problems they're trying to solve and the desires they have. And that's really what you need. So you don't need 100,000 people. You don't even need 10,000 people. But if you've got 4,500 people and an open rate of 10%, you don't have an engaged audience. So there's really a difference. And I know engagement is such a tired buzzword, but it's true. If we can, Chris may have a better term for it. He's always good at repositioning these things, but the people who really care are your people. Don't go looking for more people before you take care of the ones who care.
Email marketing has and always will be my favorite of my tools of weapons. It's the thing I love the most, and I love it because there's two ways to do it. There's one way where you just kind of like three. There's one where you whip stuff out all the time and just hope. There's the Dan Kennedy murder everybody until you get what you want way, and then there's my way, which is love on everybody as often as you can, and every now and again ask them for some money. And with email marketing, one thing we've done furiously since we started years and years ago, and through every pivot I've ever done in my business, is call the list. If you haven't opened or clicked in a while, we knock you off. And we do it furiously as often as we can, so that the list right now, like my list goes down many more months than it ever goes up. And then I have to do something really surgy to get some people to come back to it. But the reason I do that is because our open rate's ridiculous. It's like we looked at a number the other day that in the last 6 months, 91% of our list has opened something or engaged or clicked or bought something. 91 over 6 months. So like 70% though in the last month. You know what I mean? So that will tell you that there's absolutely no fat there. Lots on me, but not on my list. And the idea is that we want people who want to be on this ride. And so when Brian talks about 4,500, that's a great number, and I think that to your really important question of, is bigger better? Bigger is better if you're doing something fractional and marginal. Bigger is better if you're a burger company. But if you want to make decent money with a very small or one person staff, the best way to do it is find the right 1,000, like Kevin Kelly used to call it. And, if you're Brian, the right 4,500.
So in the world of search, Google has been getting much better at understanding the intent of the search audience at the end of the day, right? It used to be to an extent that SEO was trying to somehow fit a square peg into a round hole. Google's gotten much better at figuring out, hey, let's have all of the round pegs in this result because that's what people are looking for. They're not looking to be tricked. They're not looking to find an article about health information that's actually trying to sell a product, right? There might be advertising on the page or something like that, but they're not looking to be tricked. So that's been kind of summarized with recent updates, things like the core update, the health update, your money or your life, yada, 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 is making sure when someone's searching for medical information, they're not finding some kind of mushroom tea that's going to save your life and cure cancer, et cetera, et cetera. Now, a lot of that also has to do with understanding what people are looking for. Not only what Google is saying is the transactional versus the informational query, but also what people in your audience would be looking for. And I've found that one of the best ways to do that is to poll your audience, ask them questions, things like that. Could either of you give me an example of any of the techniques that you use to better understand your audience, and then integrate that either data or emotion or those traits to your personal marketing or your overall marketing to that audience itself?
Well, I'll take a shot at that because it's been pretty interesting. Starting Copy Blogger back in the day, it was all as much content as we could create,
Right.
create this massive platform. One of the beautiful network effects of trying to help bloggers was millions of freaking links that you could never replicate, which is the only reason why I have so many SEO friends.
Yeah.
But now, especially, for example, with Further, I went into an area where I have no authority whatsoever. So I said, I'll just do curation and share what I'm reading and build up a list there that way, which has become incredibly popular. I mean, The Hustle just sold to HubSpot. It's a curated email newsletter. It's amazing. But they found their product and they built their audience, and that's how it works. So now when I think of SEO, I flip the script, build a minimum viable audience is what I coined 10 years ago to mean the point where the audience starts growing itself. They start giving you feedback about what type of content they prefer over other content, but they also start to reveal who they are. And that's where you find these product ideas. And that's what I was talking about with the 4,500. From that got boiled down to 500 and then, 100 paying customers. And that's how we develop the product, at which point we can scale it. So except the pandemic did throw a loop, as you can imagine, but we did roll it out last year successfully. And through the process of selling the course with a free email course, that asked, at the beginning, okay, let me help you, in a more personalized fashion. Are you a freelancer? Do you have a business yet? Are you something else? Step one. Then each step of the free email course would then have homework where we would ask you questions about what you learned, but also, what are you trying to accomplish? What's your number one problem? Step by step by step. If they didn't want to answer the questions, they had to wait 24 hours to get the next installment. And your most engaged people answer the questions to get the stuff quicker. Through that process, not only did we become a profitable company from side project to startup to profitable company, but now I know the type of person that is showing up and is more likely to. And now I'm turning on the back end SEO. So the script has been flipped until you know exactly what kind of traffic you want to target through search, because search traffic can be worthless. You know this, Loren, if it doesn't convert, right? So I had to make sure I understand, okay, these are the people who are actually signing up and taking out the credit card. And that's incredibly valuable. And that's a big switch from the early days. Even now with Copy Blogger, we've gone through and, it's an incredibly valuable platform for all the content and links and whatnot, but we're actually deleting stuff and optimizing for who we are trying to serve now. And again, 15 years ago, you're deleting blog posts. Oh, what are you, crazy? Right. But that's where we're at.
I have something to pick up on that, just because. So I'm the only thing you can say about me and SEO is that I know people who do it. For the longest time in the history of it, I've ranked for the dumbest things you could rank for. I've ranked for things like grow bigger ears or you're doing it wrong. Which neither one of those do I have a business tied to. So So I had a friend who was doing, a little bit of like low level SEO type help for me, just sort of like cleaning off the edges a little bit. And they said, I don't know what's going on here, but something's crazy with your website. We got to like call somebody in. And I was like, well, I don't care. Like I'm just so blasé about this stuff. I can care less. And they were like, And so Dave Davies got involved. And you guys probably know Dave, and he's from around. And Dave comes in and he's just like, ooh, I can play with the Chris Brogan site. This will be fun. And I was like, how bad is this? How much is this going to cost me? And he goes, well, we'll make it. We'll handle that. We'll figure this out. But he goes, I can't believe I have my hands on this. And oh my gosh, my eyes. He says to me, you have some really, really hurtful blog posts on your site. And I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, you write these blog posts like with like a sentence or so. They're like a tweet. And I'm like, yeah. And he goes, that's bad. I'm like, it's bad? He goes, I just deleted like 1,800 posts of yours. I was like, oh. And he goes, there's somewhere you can go review them if you think I made bad. I said, I don't care. So you can delete everything. And he goes, you don't have like corner. I said, who do you think I am, Derek Halpern? I don't have anything. I don't know what I'm doing. And so he just deleted whatever he wanted to. And my site like started claiming some of its rightful rank.
Yeah.
With no other work, no new posts, no new anything. Like Google said, oh, okay, I get it. He's still serious, and like put my sort of wealth back in my rank. So I say that as I hope somebody here who's not an SEO, like I hope most of your audience is like, oh, what an idiot. But I hope somebody here is like me and is like, I didn't know. It's important. And the new changes, like you were saying, the new rollout stuff is huge. Not just page rank, but also passage rank and all this. But I have a question for you, Loren, which is when we look at these things like the Google Health Initiative and that, friends of mine who make health websites for a living are also seeing this as a fight and a war. And well, because Google has health products and Google has health allies, and CVS Health is getting a lot more. They're investing a lot of money. Well, guess where they're spending it? With Google, who strangely prioritizes CVS Health in search results. Huh, that's weird. So, when we keep forgetting that this is a company, not a utility, these are those moments I put my tinfoil hat on and start thinking, well, of course they tidied it up. They tidied it up to go to their allies. But it's more than that, obviously. But it feels like that, Loren.
I understand that feeling, especially in the health space, right? Where you have the Cleveland Clinic, Mayo Clinic, all of these companies suddenly appearing at the top. And I play in a lot of spaces where Walmart, Amazon, CVS, and Walgreens never used to be. And for some of these products, you would never think to go to Walgreens and CVS to buy them. But since a lot of those sites have added things like marketplaces, like the Walmart marketplace, for example, things suddenly rank that you can't even buy in the store. It's very similar, and there's a lot. It's a big flaw on the Google side, especially in the coupon space. So I work for a coupon company, and one of our biggest competitors is not the other coupon companies. It's not Honey App. It's not Coupon Follow or one of those other specific companies. It's the fact that CNN has a subdomain, coupons.cnn.com, right? BuzzFeed has a subdomain, coupons.buzzfeed.com. Business Insider has one. LA Times has one, right? So I do not go to Business Insider to find coupons for socks. That's the weirdest thing. But if you search for a lot of these terms, it happens. So I think what's happening is, there's a little bit of there's just a little bit of stray bullets being thrown, so to speak. Okay, so what's happening is that Google's adjusting the dial, especially on an authority perspective, and suddenly the sites that have that authority, CNN, Business Insider, et cetera, are starting to rise. And they're also publishers that need extra income. So suddenly there's a meeting someday and they're like, hey, let's work with this company. We'll just give them the access to our subdomain and we can make X, amount more money over the course of the year, more so than we're doing by serving all these ads to people at the end of the day. And it's something that I think on the Google side is very well overlooked. It's overlooked in a lot of spaces. So I'm glad you brought that up, because it's been frustrating for SEOs that are working on the sites that traditionally should do well in these spaces. And I think it should be frustrating from a user perspective to see all of those just unnatural listings appearing in the rankings themselves. So that's definitely a thing.
It pushes guys like Brian and I to work even harder on email lists.
Right.
When you talk about announcing the hustle getting bought by HubSpot, I'm thinking, all the years I've been writing I've been writing email since 2009 that is so Chris Brogan that I couldn't sell it to anybody. But like if I had spent that time developing like a further, Brian's always smarter than me. Brian always has this thing where someone's going to come and buy that thing and give him another 10 million. And so he could, I don't know, buy more alpacas or something. I don't know what you do with your money.
I just want to be able to hang out with Bozer in Vegas,
Yeah.
Got to have the Bozer money.
Or you got to get those VIP tables next to Tim at the local restaurants in Boulder. But that goes into the whole concept of Google proofing as well, right? So there's a lot of companies that invest everything in the SEO, or smaller publications or something like that haven't been investing in newsletters. So even at SCJ for years, we didn't have an email newsletter. Our email newsletter didn't start until about 6 years ago, right? Before then, it was just like a Yahoo Groups thing that no one really maintained. And we had to build it from there. And it's been an enlightening experience being able to build that. We realized that, hey, by building this, we can launch a virtual event, because most of the readers of our email are very interested in getting more information in a live setting about what they're learning on a daily basis. We learned that we could sell SEJ t-shirts. It's gone a little bit crazy, but we could sell SEO t-shirts. And it's a fun little project that people love and we love, and things like that as well. And I think it gets it closer to our community. And it also gives us the ability to ping that list, right? To hit them up with just a question, like, stop promoting the site for a second. Let's hit the brakes and let's ask them a question that they can answer. And then suddenly you have not only proprietary, like the data that you can utilize for your own marketing initiatives, but proprietary data that you can publish as a publisher, and then no one else has it. Then you get those links that Mr. Clark and yourself love at the end of the day by doing so.
And I think it's important to point out that to this day, email is the highest converting sales channel. And Chris and I went through how many email is dead phases since 2006, right?
Many as we could.
But now it's the whole world has found email newsletters. I'm like, what is it? 98? My first business, the only one that failed was pop culture email newsletters. I had no idea what I was doing. And that's why it failed. But then I got a little more practical. And again, that became selling stuff other than advertising, AKA content marketing. And this is the business we're all in, one way or another.
And for us, it's been really useful as well to utilize that list. And I'm not sure if you guys do much of this or not, but like to create lookalikes on Facebook, to utilize it for Google targeting. Because for us, like, there's only so many pop-ups or ads you can have to promote a webinar. Right. But if you can take that list and hit them where they naturally go in other parts of the web, then it makes sense. You can convert it over there and utilize your own site space or your own newsletter space for other things that are more educational and less promotional. So I think to an extent, it seems like Facebook and Google, sure, they're jumping on these lists themselves. I'm sure they're doing a lot of stuff with them and learning a lot of stuff from them, all this data that we're sharing with them. But they've kind of created a demand for you to build your own audience again, for you to upload to their systems as well, which is, I don't know if that's digital sharecropping or not, Brian. Any thoughts on that?
On my podcast, we just had a really great conversation with Ryan Dice, and we're touched on the whole Apple against Facebook privacy wars, and I'm like, get ready, the privacy thing is not going away, so you have to adapt. And Ryan and I agreed it's really just going back to the days before Facebook, and us old guys may have an advantage over the youngsters who don't know anything but the highly targeted Facebook ads that rely on retargeting and cookies and whatnot. But the lookalike audience thing has become that much more valuable. If you've got one, you can get more of one. And if you don't, you're going to struggle a bit.
It gets really weird. And again, I look, this beard does not make me, does not beget like a tinfoil hat guy.
I don't know.
But you got to
Let's
think
see.
about something.
No, it kind of does, actually.
Maybe it does. Maybe I'm signaling loudly right now. But this reminds me of, I went to what was Perillo, Gnomedex, Chris Perillo's Gnomedex
Oh, wow.
way back in the day. And
Old
they had
school.
a guy on. This guy was like, he looked like me. So this should tell you something. He had this and he had his glasses on, and they were smudgy like mine. And he was yelling so loudly from the front row that people were like backing up a little because he was just super excited when he was talking about it. And he was like, Google this. And he kept yelling, Google this. And he was like something to do with national security, something or other back in the day, and Amazon's top 10 reviewer, like of their whole platform or something like that. And I was like, how can you be those two things? They don't even make sense. So listen, Amazon acquired Ring. Ring is being subpoenaed more than ever before by over 1,600 active current last week. Ring subpoenas now through the police department. They want to know what your doorbell knows, right? What is Amazon also doing a ton of? Face recognition for who? Oh yeah, law enforcement again. These systems, these collection points, these tools, like we think it's cool when we can insert a cookie. We think it's cool when we can match an email somewhere. But these people have more and more biometric data than you could ever imagine. Gate stuff. It is, Minority Report is so real. Minority Report, we all got excited about this part of Minority Report, but it was always, Tom Crocher, would you like a Guinness beer? It was always that part that we should have been thinking a lot about. And I think that's, we're going to be going to a bunch of eyeball surgeons in cold bathtubs any day now to try to get things better.
And here's something to think about. If you want to avoid the privacy exploiting industrial complex of Facebook, Amazon, Google, the best way to build your email list is to advertise in other email newsletters. And you get someone with a list that's close to who you're trying to reach with 20,000 people on it, and you've got 0. You can advertise very affordably to people who already subscribe to email newsletters. That's important because the conversion rate to email from Facebook has been dropping, and it's getting, worse because maybe they don't want email. You need, so think about it that way as well.
So besides advertising, I'm glad you got into this because I wanted to kind of talk about expanding these audiences that are quite valuable. Besides advertising with other email newsletters, which I definitely have on my list of things to look into, what are some other ways that you can expand your audience that's not necessarily Facebook or ad specific? Any recommendations on that end?
I'm curious to know what Brian's doing. I'll answer, but I'm just really curious on Brian.
Yeah, it's interesting, because Chris, I always think of you as I tell people, don't expect if you have an audience one place that they're necessarily going to follow you.
Yeah.
Remember, Chris, when you were heavily into health and wellness and lifting and everything, and you kind of struggled and I with getting the Chris Brogan people, the social media guy, right? So I learned from that, and I knew that Further wasn't going to just get built off Copyblogger. And in fact, the early people who followed me over there were just watching to see what I was doing. They were worthless.
Yeah.
So I booted them all off. So yeah, I experiment with a lot of things. No more. For those of us who remember the golden years of early social media, free organic, viral distribution, gosh, those were the days. All you had to do was create some bombastic, high-value piece of content and watch it take off to the Dig homepage. If anyone remembers those days, yeah,
I remember.
Try to keep the servers up, and your audience and your links would just grow exponentially. But now social's pay to play. I hate that. I hate Zuckerberg. There's no one is confused about that one. So I play with social ads. I rely on getting mentioned. Don't think of it as a link. Think of it as the direct traffic itself first and foremost. The link is nice, but even, if Google decides not to count it, it's still important. And I think that people don't realize that the primary value of links is as an audience transmission pathway, where people are coming over to you. I mean, really, Copyblogger really got its, viability from some old school bloggers like Steve Rubel and Scoble, basically thinking, yeah, they're like, who is this Clark guy thinks you can sell with blogs? What an asshole. And their audience was like, I'm interested. And then they went over and there you go. So yeah, just get the URL correct. It doesn't matter if it's good or bad publicity.
Oh, I was thinking of the gazillions of blog posts about why I was wrong and how each one that sent a nice link to me and like, Chris Brogan's a big asshole. And they'd go there and they'd be like, well, I don't know. He seems kind of nice.
Yeah, he's all right.
And then they'd stick around. And those people, every now and again, I'm not a particularly vindictive person, but every now and again, I just sort of look over the shoulder at a lot of bloggers who are now back to being employees. And, bless their hearts. And I'm glad they're in a good place. And I'm glad they can feed their family. But I'm still out here. I'm still out here doing the same stuff I said you could do way back then, even though I fail sometimes. And even though I don't have a pony, I'm still doing good.
You don't have a pony?
I don't. I don't. I some of my little pals and their alpacas and they're, rebuilding their fifth house and all that sort of thing. I'm like, I still sometimes think before I see the check come in, if I should have ordered that food or not, that kind of thing.
But once I figured out what Further's actual, that it was for people at midlife, which happens to be our own Generation X, the editorial links, you're serving an forgotten generation. Don't you think people are going to talk about it? That's important, right? Don't be a me too, and find something that fits your sense of purpose so you can stick with it and be passionate with it. And people will notice. But there's also guest posting. Some people use Medium. I never was that huge a fan. And then, of course, you start finding these less than conventional advertising opportunities or list swap ads or, you can get really creative.
List swaps does sound very 90s, late 90s. I
exactly,
like,
right?
Yeah. It's kind of cool to see. I mean, what is guest books going to come back and things like that, right? Or co-registration networks. But the thing that I liked, Brian.
Speaking of Chris Pirillo, I was in a co-registration thing with him way back in the days, and now I don't even know what Pirillo's up to anymore.
No, neither do I.
All streaming all the time. I think he's product streaming, I believe.
Yeah. So one thing you brought up, Brian, was the links being an audience transition mechanism, right? And I really like that because I especially in the world of search, again, we've kind of ruined linking for everybody. And to us, linking is a currency. Let's try to get links on these valuable sites. I'll go and I'll tell a room of people, hey, it's not just about what they're ranked by a third-party tool. It's about their audience, right? Or their potential future audience. If someone loves Chihuahuas and they've loved Chihuahuas their whole life and they've never written about it and they start a Chihuahua blog and a Chihuahua newsletter, if I want to sell to the owners of Chihuahuas, that's where I want to be. Doesn't matter what a third-party tool tells me in terms of their value in the eyes of Google. I want to be in front of that audience and I want to be able to get in before that audience starts to grow. So I want to be in that GameStop audience when it's at $7 and not when it's at $350, right? So that's an opportunity. When I started doing marketing, one of my first jobs was link building. And you guys will remember, this was like pre-Google as well. So it wasn't for SEO value. And you guys will remember personal checks, right? Personal checks used to be a thing before debit cards and everything else. And I worked for a company that had affinity checks. So they had checks for wrestlers. They had checks for NASCAR fans. They had checks for model train enthusiasts. So my job was to find all of the sites, all of the GeoCity pages, all of the email newsletters about those subjects and write them and ask them to link or to feature. Styles Checks was the company at the time, those checks for their audience. And it worked magically. from a transactional perspective, because it was a warm introduction to the audience. It wasn't, hey, this is the best post ever. Do you mind changing out this broken link with this new link and yada, yada, yada. It wasn't that. It was a, hey, we've just launched this new product. I noticed that, you write a lot about model trains. This is amazing. I wanted to know if how we can do something together. Next thing I know, that person, even before blogging, has put a link on their homepage and a little article about how much they like the checks with trains on them. And we're seeing the sales come in. And I think it has to go back to that. Google's tried to do that. A lot of the new talk that Google's doing around, digital PR and outreach and not pushing for links or not trying to have a currency behind them and stuff like that, is really hitting the reverse button and going to what we were doing years ago, which is, transitioning that audience from one publication maybe to the next, and an introduction back and forth. And I like where you guys are going in terms of doing that in email, doing it possibly in advertising, but also doing it really on the meat and potatoes organic side behind what you're writing and what you're doing, and the value that you've seen as people have done that for you over the years as well.
Well, so I wanted to say something about the way I'm doing this video show, and it's a weekday video show. It's called The Backpack Show. It's with a co-host, Carrie Gorgone, and we do 2 guests usually. Sometimes there's 1, sometimes there's 3, but on average 2 guests. And the guests are always from places and people you wouldn't normally know. So today was Steve Spahn, who is COO of Able Gamers, and what they are doing is helping people with disabilities get more traction in what their pursuits are in video games. So he's behind Microsoft making that really cool gamepad for people to play on that we saw at last year's Super Bowl or the year before Super Bowl. Who's counting? The other person was a woman who runs a dance studio in New York. And the basic premise there was for cultures and communities that weren't as served, so that people, especially in a place like New York where there's all these fancy dance people, what's it like for bringing it to the people? This other was a lady who's doing a community space for women of color, as well as an entrepreneurial space for women of color. 60% of women of color entrepreneurs say that they have no access to funding or no access to, any kind of a arm on credit, even though they have incredible credit ratings, et cetera, et cetera. Meanwhile, there's a ton of banks going, we'd love to serve loans to more women of color. We'd love to do more partnering in these businesses. So these spaces exist. And to your point, Loren, I gave you that back paint just to give you this one concept back, which is that when people like my show surface people in those kinds of verticals and spaces that are doing something, then some other people can come along and go, oh, I didn't even know this is a thing. So we're without any kind of, we don't draw any money from this or anything like that. We're brokering a lot of introductions and a lot of connections and a lot of, goodness is being had. And what this is the Chris Brogan model of selling anything for the long, however many years, is that over the next decade, people are going to go, oh man, I got that through Chris. Here's this other thing. I'm going to see if I can participate in some way that does become financial. Someone will say, we'd love to put some money behind this project because we got something from it. How do we bring it forward for other people? That kind of a thing. So there's so many ways to not seek the revenue up front. And there's so many values all the way back to affinity checks and finding the kind of people who would love that sort of a thing. That there's not an immediacy to the transaction. And I hope SCJ viewers pay that some thought as well, is that you're not always going to be able to put this in an easy spreadsheet for some amount of time, but there's some massive upswing if you give things a chance to breathe a bit.
Well, first of all, I want to point out that if you have Chihuahua and GeoCities on your bingo card, you just won. Secondly, let me comment on what I call link begging. Back in 2006, when first 3 months of Copy Blogger, and I'm really trying to find a way to get some attention, how it is when you feel like you're all alone, just throwing stuff into the universe. One of my first significant links came from a guy named Darren Rouse, pro blogger. Quick email that I looked at for 30 minutes before I hit send that basically said, hey, I see you're writing about blog titles. Really from a copywriting standpoint, that's headlines. And here's what I wrote about that. And he saw Copyblogger as a compliment, not a competitor to ProBlogger. And part of his audience came over. This was before all the other bloggers hated me. So, so there's that story, and that's meaningful.
Yeah.
Was there SEO value in that link? Probably. But that wasn't the value. Those were readers, and those readers linked and spread and whatnot. Now, fast forward to now with Further, and I get the link begging email that wants me to update the old post, right? And I'm like, you idiot, I run a curated newsletter. Tell me to put it in the new issue, and I might. But why am I going to go update that post? What's in it for me? I don't care, you know? But I could use some new material for this week.
Exactly.
Genius.
Exactly. Don't miss right in front of your face. What's going on?
It's right there in front of you.
Oh man! So all of you link builders and link beggars out there, beggars banquet of link builders, keep in mind that instead of just asking for retroactive fixes, trying to sneak things in, you might have something valuable enough that Brian or Chris or somebody who's a writer or a curator actually wants to share to their audience.
Well, you know, that link I got from Darren, remember, Chris, the old link post where, you know, basically a lot of those links were just from here's what I found that was interesting, short, you know, it was early curation. It was basically description, short commentary, and a link. And that was valuable at that time. Now curation, I think, is more sophisticated, but it still comes down to the same thing. Here's something worth your attention, and here's what I think about it, and go over there and look at it. That's what you want, right? You get the link, and, you know, I get it. That post back there is the one you want because you found it in search, and you think it's going to boost your ranking, but there's a bigger picture.
I agree. This is one of the first things that I tell like the folks that work for me. And I always like telling the story about how I started out link building before Google with different goals in mind, because that was the best audience to get in front of, right? And that's definitely been lost and everything else. But I think it's coming back. There's something that feels like, sure, I get these, like all the funny thing about practicing SEO and having a publication about SEO is some of the same people I know email the publication, right, from their companies and stuff like that with those same templates. And we see them all the time, you know, best post ever, or like the name's always wrong, or they always call me Mrs. Baker, which I'm used to. Actually, it hasn't happened as much as it used to before social media. So I kind of get a kick out of it.
I love it when they leave the last person's name in there because they copied and pasted.
Exactly.
I could just go on, 20 minutes before the show telling me about how they really love my show. They referenced the most recent one, which I always feel like, haven't we taught you anything? Don't you know you're supposed to go back about 7, so it doesn't look like you just went to the top of the page?
The one with the less views.
If you're going to manipulate, be good at it.
Get good at it, scrub.
That's another thing. Like, everything doesn't scale, right? I think the word scale is kind of messed up some things too. But if you take the time, to your point, Chris, just take the time. Don't just look for the last one, put it in there, ask for this, whatever. But take the time to watch, to become a fan. Comment on the blog maybe before you send an email. Participate, add value, right? Because then if even if you're doing it with a business, like a mindset to get an ROI from it, you end up actually contributing anyway, right? And it is like you were saying, that with of course at a different level, but with your show now, you're giving it out there, right? You have an audience, you have a platform. What are you going to use it for? Are you going to use it to promote yourself and backpacks, backpack of the day type thing? Or are you going to give back to the community a little bit, shine the light on people that need that audience, and really help them out at the end of the day? And even by doing that on a micro level, right, with people that you want to work with perhaps, or want to team up with, or even just ask a favor from, it's okay to do that. Make sure that you're giving value first by doing so. And like from a blogging perspective, I know when I see a comment come through, I read it. And if someone has taken the time, if the blog still has comments on it, if someone's taken the time to actually write that out, it's a top 5 list, add a 6 and a 7. Just say, hey, I thought this would be useful too. Maybe they'll publish it. Maybe they'll copy that and add it to the post at the bottom and suddenly give you a link back. Who knows? But just take the time to do that. And it doesn't take that much more time than trying to scrape every site on the internet, scrape their names and email information all incorrectly and send out a bunch of emails, right? You might see that there's, if not the same, but a much better ROI at the end of the day. Plus, you've just made a friend.
Yeah, I mean, I see a lot of the up and coming younger marketers, and they're in little alliances, they're little packs that run together. And people don't realize that me and Brogan and Darren were our own little pack. We supported each other. We ended up going into business with each other. We were affiliates for each other. And that was amazing. I don't think it would have happened for me without it. So that's meaningful. That's a meaningful relationships, as opposed to filling out a template that you got from some internet marketer or SEO guru, the Neil Patel special, and fill in the blanks. When does this isn't Mad Libs?
Mad Libs. Jinx.
That's two things in there. One is that I always say to people, do you don't think that if I'm in the marketing space, you don't think I see this every day? That's always my reply to these. At this point, I should, and I haven't done it yet, I should get a text.
You reply? Oh my gosh.
Oh,
I don't even reply. I just delete.
So this is where the beard comes in. I'm a grumpy old man on the lawn, man. I'm like, hey, you stupid marketer shits. You should do it better. And I go right on them because I'm like, you want to just do this so much better. Like, you're so bad at it. Like, at least you'd have a shot. And you're telling me how you value my site, but you didn't do anything to show me that you valued my site. So I could, you cut me a check, I'll believe you value the site, but I don't do paid links, so sorry. But I guess what I would say is that, it's amazing how people would presume that we've not seen every one of the gimmicks, and that they wouldn't just sort of, you get so much better with straight on, like, hey man, I'm a new guy and I don't know anybody, and I've really got to try to figure out how this goes. How do I get a link on your site? I would bend over for that person. What can I do? How do I help you? Because they went straight down the nose.
Yeah, even the more sophisticated approaches, I'm dissecting it. I've got your game figured out, but at least I respect you a little more, right?
If it's clever.
Yeah.
If it's clever.
It's honesty too. It's the guy on the side of the road with the sign saying "Need money for beer," right? Or
yes.
whatever it is, right? It's like those are the ones that get the most tips at the end of the day. Not someone trying to trick you or whatever. Even if they're going to take that money and buy something completely different with it, at least they thought of something halfway original to do so on that front.
No question.
Who do you guys got on Sunday? Buccaneers or the Chiefs?
Well, my practice has been to always root against Tom Brady, and that's not gotten me very far. So I'm thinking this year, I secretly want the Chiefs to win, but I go for the Bucs, and maybe that'll work. Otherwise, that guy, I've got mad respect for him. He's too perfect. That's my thing. You got the supermodel wife. You're a good-looking guy. You're 43 years old, and you got 6 Super Bowl rings going for 7, I think. I've lost count. So I can't say I hate Tom Brady. It's just like if anyone wrote the Tom Brady story as fiction, it would get rejected.
Chris?
Andy had that very successful food box delivery service, afterwards, just for something else to do, TB12. Born and raised in New England. I benefited from all those Super Bowls living here in Massachusetts. I'll stick with Brady just for that reason. I think Kansas City are some good people, though, and I would like to see him win just on that sort of feel-good side of it, but I can't go against Brady.
Yeah, I'd like to see him win too, for what we were talking about a little bit earlier. He's like 42, 43 now, right? So there's like some respect for somebody. Like if I took a hit like that, I'd be in bed for a week afterwards, half the time, right? So sure, I do eat strawberries and I do eat tomatoes, and I don't have my own personal masseuse following me around everywhere. So maybe a little bit different than Brady's upkeep and everything else, but it is mad respect. But it looks like it's going to be a good game. You got superstars on both sides of the field. Don't think they can keep it up much longer from a salary cap perspective. They'll look like teams that you make yourself in Madden. So it's going to be good. I did hear that there's going to be there's a lot of rain expected, so that should make things kind of interesting. Tampa, hey.
No Budweiser ad this year. A bunch of other important, long-standing clients, advertising-wise, have pulled out. I'm always there for the ads, so I'm curious to know what they're going to do with that.
Why do you think that is, Brogan?
Well, with Budweiser, they're still fighting the seltzer war problem. Beer has a massive seltzer problem right now, and so a lot of them.
And why would you want to drink seltzer? I don't get it.
Dude, my little grocery store, the one I go to for my groceries, has a beer section, which is like 86% seltzer at this point.
Seltzer,
and it's the thing. It's like Zima 1.
Right.
Remember back in the 90s or something? It's like Zima 1.
it's kids.
That's not a selling point. I don't know. Yeah, they've been sneaking their Gen X moms seltzer. Zima, and they're like, developed a taste for it.
Well, do you guys think that has also to do with like? I was having this conversation earlier. Are there going to be more people watching since the game's on at home? And a lot of folks are locked down or they just don't feel comfortable going out? Or is it going to be less people than you would typically have around the TV? Because at a party, not everyone's watching the game, but they are paying attention to the commercials and the halftime show, right? Has anyone pulled out besides Budweiser? I haven't been paying much attention.
There's a few more, and I'm blanking on them, but they're ones that every time you'll see your eyebrows go, oh, I didn't think of that. But that's a great question. I don't know. I've never been, I'm a hermit, so I really tend to watch my things by myself anyway. I don't go to ball game parties, but I would say that my feel is that the attendance will be high, but that's a good question. I don't know what the expectations are for that.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't either. I'm kind of done with the NFL, and has nothing to do with the fact that the Broncos are terrible, I assure you.
It sounds like a Bozer comment at the end of the season.
Exactly.
The NFL this year. Why?
But it'll be interesting, like Robin Hood, after the whole GameStop fiasco, is going to have a Super Bowl commercial. Things are so weird that I don't even make projections anymore because, at first I'm like, Robin Hood killed their brand. Oh, wait, no.
I was talking about
didn't have the capital, right? And now they're running a Super Bowl ad. I'm like, wait a minute. What's the truth here? We don't even know.
World.
Yeah.
Bizarro world. Excellent. Well, thanks, guys. It's been a real pleasure having you on. I wanted to change things up a little bit because we have lots of discussions about Google updates or this or that or getting very granular. But I really wanted to talk about the big picture of not only audience, but publishing. And I think there's been a lot of valuable information that both of you have been able to share as well. Chris, I'm really impressed by your beard. I'm in my late 40s, and to this day, I'm not able to grow one. I grow the Che Guevara patches all over the face, and that's about it. This is so last April, at the very beginning of COVID, I shaved my head all the way to this skin, and this is since then. So I have this like big weed whacker of hair, and then the beard. I mean, I think I had it reasonably trimmed. I did this after Christmas. That tells you like my planning, right? But
damn,
it's
you are a mountain man.
I am her.
You need to move here to Colorado, boy.
I look like I look like I'm from there.
I shaved my head too, but about a week ago, so it's almost time for me to revisit.
Got to get back.
Or else I'm going to grow out the Gallagher, Larry Fine style side, whatever you would call that, side mullet.
Now we switched into an episode of Further where we talk about our hairstyles.
Yeah,
exactly. This could be the Further show with our old asses.
Just go to cbrogan.me/StreamYard. You could have your own cool streaming episode. Get it.
There you go. Anything either of you would like to say before we leave? A reminder of where we can find you online, your publications, anything else?
No,
all good. Just look them up. We're against Chris Brogan.
We're against link begging and self-promotion, Loren.
Substack isn't new. They just did it cleaner. The new one that Twitter just bought, they're not better than Substack. They're just in Twitter. So if you love Twitter, get some more Twitter. That's fine. That's it. But, a paid newsletter subscription is a very viable thing if you have an audience that really wants what you can sell. and nurture a free newsletter first and learn how to do it right. And then you can maybe put your big shoes on and try to convince people to pay. That's it. That's my last advice.
Despite your lack of self-promotion, Chris, I'm going to drop some links to the backpack show and everything else, because we're going to help. We're going to help shine that light on the folks that you have done as well.
Bring them.
And you can get more from Brogan at SethGodin.com.
Yes. Which is it still TypePad? Does he still run a TypePad blog?
No, I think he finally got off of there. But you're starting to sound more like him, and that's not a bad thing. So
that's a terrible thing.
Just need the glasses.
Brian, what did I do wrong to you?
oh, I thought that was a compliment. Yeah, who hurt you, Brian?
I love Seth Godin. We haven't chatted in real time in a while, but Loren, you could just have on old people all the time now. This is who knew SEJ Monthly.
We should do a co-branded thing with Further there.
Yeah, we could co-register off of Further.
Oh, geez.
There you go. So, Brian, we can find you on further.net.
Net and unemployable.com. A one-word.com domain that no one saw any value in because they didn't know the ironic meaning.
Oh, wow. I love it. I need a t-shirt that says unemployable. You have any merch by any chance?
I'm gonna cook some up. We got Further merch, but I need the unemployable. So
merch. And if you need SEO merch, go to merch.searchenginejournal.com to get the latest and the greatest of SEO merch. Guys, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for jumping on today. Thank you so much for talking football, talking facial hair, and of course, talking audiences and everything else. It's been great catching up. So thanks again. And we're going to wind things down here at almost the top of the hour on the SEJ show.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Loren. Good to see you guys.